When George Thorne said to me, you got to study the brain before you go forward, that was a very revolutionary idea. The idea of neuroscience, we're talking the 50s, the idea of neuroscience doesn't come in for another decade. And there I was, set on a new path. He didn't tell me it would be a hacking of a trail, and I would infuriate people and why they got so mad when I was just doing what medical people do.
And I want to add just how seductive and similar to the trans promise it is, that you've got this inner thing behind you that just needs to be unlocked. And once you unlock, it's like a fairy tale. You've got the golden key. And when you get the golden key to open, it's so attractive to think, all my boring neurosis, all my irritating worries and anxieties, it's all because of one thing that I just have to unlock. Yes. I wish that life was like that, but it's so seductive.
The multiple personality problem not only hurt patients, but hurt the field of psychotherapy by making it clear that some psychotherapists had misled their patients. And that's one of the main reasons, a good reason for challenging the trans now. They're going to, once again, cast doubt on whether you could trust psychotherapists. And you need them.
So, do I call you Professor Paul McHugh, Dr. Paul McHugh?
How do you do?
We got a great response from your last program with us. We were thrilled. Did you see any of the responses, or did you watch it or anything?
My daughter showed me some of them. It's very pleasant. Anyway, people seemed interested in our conversation, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah. What was amazing to me is, you've been kind of, in many ways, you've been screaming for the rafters for decades and decades, and people are coming around to where you're thinking now.
Yeah, it's a long time. I've been on the road a while.
What I was interested in to begin with, I know Mia has a whole line of really interesting points around multiple personality disorder and dissociative identity disorder. But what I wanted to begin with, if you don't mind, is the Freudians. And yes. You parted ways with them quite early, as did I. But I did it more privately and less prestigiously than you. So could you tell me what your position is about the Freudian narrative of the human psyche and what you took issue with?
Well, I take issue with their approach to the patient. They come to the patient with fixed ideas and deductively put those ideas in the patient's head, but with the belief that will help bring the person into reality, rid of them of whatever mental problems they have. And I think that deductive approach is contrary to the way medicine does everything else. We work inductively. That is, we begin with the patient coming with complaints, but then study everything we can about the presentation, the laboratory data that we can get, other information, and put together a formulation from the bottom up rather than from the top down. So that to the main question with psychiatry faces, the main question is, what is madness? The Polonius question, madness. What is it to be mad? Why, it's just to be mad. And the deductive approach and the DSM approach is to say your illness meets criteria. That's why it's an illness, rather than saying this is a condition that has these generative sources, and it makes sense to us as a particular kind of disorder that emerges naturally with the information that we've acquired from your story. So, if everybody would remember that the big problem today is that whereas we understand every physical illness as a particular kind of phenomenon, in life. In psychiatry, we're still struggling to find what the nature is of the disorders. And when you ask many psychiatrists today, what's the nature of this person? Well, we don't know. We've got a name for it, and he meets criteria for that condition, so therefore he's got it. Well, when you ask, well, what has he got? They can't tell you other than they say he meets criteria for it, and we've given it a name. And very often, to quote the bard again, gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. And there you got it. Okay.
There's one thing that you've mentioned, the overvalued belief, and in a way there's an overvalued belief right through the middle, the center of Freudian analysis, which is this kind of seductive idea that there's these memories that happened in your childhood, and they set your course in life. And it's incredibly attractive to think, oh, when I remember this memory and I process it, then I will be set free to be this happy person. It's incredibly attractive, and we cling onto it as humans of that's all I need to do. And it doesn't.
It has that salvationist quality. You found the answer to life's issues, and you're going to go forward with it. And I was drawn to it when I was a medical student because some of the best and brightest of my fellow students were interested in it. I liked to be in their company, and they told me that they found this a future. And I found it a little peculiar because it was different from everything else I was learning in medical school. But, I was prepared to go along until I got into my internship in medicine. My concerns were kind of brought to light for me by the professor of medicine under whom I was studying my medical training. He said he didn't think that if I went in the direction everybody was going in 1950s into psychiatry, that I would have any opportunity to lead the field. And he said, it's because they don't know anything about the brain. They tell you stories about what mental life is about, and they spend a lot of time talking and thinking about themselves. But, the brain must have something to do with it. So why don't you ask that question and then think of what you might do in your career? That's how it happened. It's just somebody approached me from the medical and empirical side and noted for me and underlined for me that the direction it was going was probably not going to work out. And it woke me up. Well, it did more than that. It startled me to be told here after 4 years at medical school that the Hersey professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School didn't think that the field was going in the right direction and I might try something different if I wish to be, as he say, play with the big boys. So I was, that first thing was just to say, take a look before you jump. I realized this was going to be something different, and I took a long weekend, believe it or not. I realized this was going to be something very different. I took a long weekend and went on a retreat in a Trappist monastery at Spencer, Mass, and thought about my future, what the message was. Came back and I said, well, he's the Hersey professor. I'm just a kid from Lawrence, Mass, and I better do what he said. So I did it, and as soon as I got into neurology and at the Mass General with Ray Adams and Morris Victor and Pearson Richardson and people like that, the issue of the distinction between the inductive and the deductive approach to understanding human behavior, mental life, and it's where it became obvious to me. And after that, there was no turning back. They sent me to Britain, where I studied under Aubrey Lewis, and well, the rest is history, as they say. But when George Thorne said to me, you got to study the brain before you go forward, that was a very revolutionary idea. The idea of neuroscience, we're talking the 50s, the idea of neuroscience doesn't come in for another decade. And there I was, set on a new path. He didn't tell me it would be a hacking of a trail, and I would infuriate people and why they got so mad when I was just doing what medical people do. Anyway, I can go on like that forever. But the idea was, once you began to see that this was an approach to understanding that was different than medicine had been for 150 years, it became clear what I had to do. I not only abandoned it, but I began to challenge it. And I didn't know how far I would go, but eventually I was given a chance to teach and practice and lead in places like Cornell Medical School and Oregon, simply because the Freudian idea had not only petered out, it had failed to generate research in a time when medical schools were thriving on research enterprises that were bringing new knowledge to medicine in general, and as I could show soon, into psychiatry.
Now, the Freudian idea, you say it failed, and it did, and it was mumbo jumbo mostly. But then it massively resurged in a really bizarre way in multiple personality disorder and the recovered memory movement. How did that happen?
People were accustomed to thinking that way, and this was a simple reversal of the Freudian idea. You might call it a Freudian heresy. It worked with the idea that the mind had mysteries, and you needed to understand how it was challenged by life. Freud himself began with the idea that, in fact, he had seen that child abuse was at the heart of the problem. But he abandoned that when he came to realize that half his family would be accused of being child abusers. And that's when he reversed it and said, it's not that the child is abused, it's the child or the infant has thoughts that have to be replaced or repressed. And the false memory people said, no, Freud got frightened and lost his confidence. In fact, he was right and we're right. And they produced the idea that, in fact, the child was forgetting, repressing a real abuse, and that repression put into unconscious life an issue that would come up later as any repressed idea does in their view. And so they just began to show people that they could persuade them that they had been abused. Just as Freud could persuade them that they had an Oedipus complex, so these people could persuade them they had a hidden, repressed abuse experience that needed to be brought to life. It was fascinating that it caught on so quickly, but I think it was because people were accustomed to view the mind in a Freudian way.
Can I just say, for people who don't know, that Freud in the 1890s, he very much kind of promoted this idea that there was a huge amount of sexual abuse that people had repressed. They didn't know it, but they had forgotten it. It was somewhere unlocked, somewhere in the back of their mind, completely repressed, and he could draw it out with hypnosis. Then in the 1990s, as Mia said, like kind of the same thing happened. It was incredibly similar to Freud's kind of idea in the 1890s. And I want to add just how seductive and similar to the trans promise it is, that like
Oh,
you've got this inner thing behind you that just needs to be unlocked. And once you unlock, it's like a fairy tale. You know, you've got the golden key. When you get the
yeah.
golden key to open, it's so attractive to think all my boring neurosis, all my irritating worries and anxieties, it's all because of one thing that I just have to unlock.
Yes,
Wish
it's,
that life was like that, but it's so seductive. It's so attractive to think of life like that. And I
it's,
think that's why we keep on following it again and again. And somebody
yeah.
underneath your interview in a few weeks ago with us, somebody put in a book that there was yet another book released this year about somebody who'd repressed a memory of abuse. This year, 2025.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
So it's not going away. It's just lingers because it's so attractive.
crazy. They're back when they pop up, thinking that people have forgotten the arguments. It's just what we talked about Penrose the last time.
Are you familiar with, I think the book is called The Body Keeps the Score, that has been a bestseller it's still to this day, it's been a bestseller for years, a decade or so.
I know there must be something the matter with us because Bessel van der Kolk can make tons with a best-selling book for 4 or 5 years.
Oh, longer. Yeah.
A very attractive idea, and it is fundamentally derived from psychoanalytic backgrounds. But the person who really formulated this idea about trauma and the persistence of trauma as the explanation was Elvin Semrad at the Mass Mental Health Center, who was a teacher of Bessel van der Kolk, and he was an interesting character.
Well, okay, what's my question now? Because of this whole body keeps the score, I'm just going to go off on a bit of a tangent. And I don't know if you've seen on TikTok, there's like dissociative identity disorder TikTok, where all of these kids are performing their different alters, and it's very mesmerizing. The MPD fiasco was terrible. It did awful, awful harm. Do you see that it could resurge? Dissociative identity disorder could resurge in the same way?
Oh yeah, it can come back, but it won't last as long as it did before. Remember, the arguments that were used to put an end to it, including arguments in court and the huge settlements that had to be given, those are not forgotten. They will be reawakened. They'll be reawakened by these claims as they come back. And I believe that you can't tell. I mean, the gullibility of the American public being what it is, you could overwhelm them for a while. But I think the old arguments still hold true, and it'll go away again. Go back into the swamp anyway for a while. But I was very amused to see it because we had predicted it. We had said, give it 20 years, 25 years, it'll come back because people will remember, will look to see if anybody remembers. Use the old arguments. Anyway.
So that brings me to the diagnosis itself then, because I think I got something wrong, as I said in my email, in that when I've been talking about multiple personality disorder, I always saw the DSM-4 shift to the diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder as being a positive thing. I thought that Alan Francis, chair of the DSM-4, I thought that he certainly thinks that did something to help quench the flames, to reduce the amount of harm that was done. But when I read your book, Try to Remember, I got the impression that you don't agree with that completely. Is that true?
As I said before, this is just another name for a phenomenon that needs to be understood for its nature. You don't, as I quoted the bard a minute ago, giving to Airy nothing, local habitation and a name doesn't make airy nothing something else. And I just thought, well, they're going to use dissociative disorder rather than convergence disorder as they move around amongst the Freudian stories and terminology. And, this is the problem with our field. We're committed to a denotative rather than a connotative diagnostic system. We're pointing things out rather than explaining them, and just changing a name, in my opinion. Now, Alan Francis is a wonderful guy, a very gifted psychiatrist, and I don't like to disagree with him, but I do here. And
Nicely done.
What a conversation is about.
There's an awful lot of people get very distressed about the terms that are used for different mental health issues, be they, multiple personality or ADHD is a big one. People really dislike the word hysteria because it derives from this crazy idea of a wandering womb that was wandering around your body, and while of course, I don't like the idea of somebody promoting this idea that there was a womb wandering around my body, and that's why I'm hysterical. However, I do think hysteria covered an awful lot of getting a person to understand what's going on in a person's mind. And by the same token, I think neurosis also covered a lot of ground. It kind of gave us a very strong understanding of what could be going on. And I feel the speed of the new terms means nobody's really sure what anything is. We've all lost. It feels very chaotic and unstable now.
That's right. I absolutely agree with that. And that's why my problem is with DSM. And I've tried several times to persuade them that by simply working with criteria, with the epistemological idea that if they can be reliable in their use of a word, they will eventually find validity, and that they've given up on intelligibility. I wrote an essay in a philosophy group that I might send you, but ultimately is saying, you got to be intelligible in order to work towards explanation, not simply reliable. And that's what's happened. We've built up a huge set of terms and words and have advanced nowhere despite that, and try by a term to obscure the ignorance behind it. Okay? Now, hysteria, I agree with you, is a terrible term. But as Aubrey Lewis said, it seems to outlive its obituous again and again. Fundamentally, it is. We really now understand it to mean a term for someone who is seeking the sick role, who wants to have the advantage of being viewed as a sick person without having the illness, without having an illness. And our culture encourages that by giving to the sick some advantages that others can seek. Okay, and once you begin to see that whatever term you want to use for it, for seeking the sick role and acting within it as a paralyzed person, as a person who's blind, a person who is having seizures or things of that sort, or a person having multiple personalities. It's all, you see, the advantages that come from it. It's a behavior. And my colleague Philip Slavny wrote a brilliant small book entitled The Perspectives on Hysteria that I recommend to everybody. Philip Slavny, The Perspectives on Hysteria. It's a brilliant book. And after you read it, you will both be amused at the term and also be illuminated with the kinds of patients that we've been dealing with ever since then. It has been a medicine culture, a medical culture.
Do you think you could fit trends into that model as well? You've got the people who want to be blind, people who want to be paralyzed, people who have multiple personalities. Do you think trans can slot in there as well?
Yes, I think so. You discover this trans idea is picked up by vulnerable people. And I often just say, we should stop talking to them about this and start working with them on that. That's what we learned in the multiple personality. In my book, Try to Remember, I discuss the eating disorder group at Hopkins, these young girls who had anorexia nervosa and were brought in because they were starving to death. Many of them, when they were there, they began to claim they had multiple personalities. And a gifted leader of our eating disorder, Angela Guarda, would say to the patient, that's too tough for us. We're going to help you with your anorexia, and we're not going to let you talk to your therapist about your multiple personality because that distracts us. But we'll get back to it. And after a few weeks of ignoring it, it disappeared in the patients. As they got better from their anorexia, they didn't restart. The same thing.
We saw that with Alex Capo. He is a director of a therapeutic boarding school in Boston, near Boston, I think, the Charlton School. And what he did an amazing system of, people would come in with gender identity issues, girls, because it was a girls' therapeutic boarding school. And he did exactly as you just described. He just said, we'll leave that be, we'll focus on everything else. And it just went. It was phenomenal. It's the power of group as well. It's the power. It's a few things that are going on there.
That's right. There's nothing like attention, especially when you're worried about yourself. And what young person doesn't have at some time a little worry about himself? And anyway, if you're a true believer, though, you'll push this ahead. And it's the true believers that keep it going. And that began. There's a history of that in medicine. It goes back to Charcot with the Salpêtrière, where they had the young women who began to have all kinds of abnormal behaviors, dancing and falling down and stretching out. And Charcot thought he discovered something new, hysteroepilepsy, but they were in an epileptic ward and they were copying the patients with epilepsy and discovered they got the doctor's attention, and that was quite fulfilling. Anyway, the history of psychiatry, we made the mistakes. We've made the same mistakes again and again. It takes a while to recognize it.
That brings me to what I want to ask next. I love how you talk about psychiatry, just the cycle of psychiatry going off and adopting, I think you call it, fundamentally incoherent practices because it's fallen captive to culture. And my question is always why. I think you've said even in Try to Remember that other fields of medicine are also, they do fall captive to culture, but it seems to me nowhere near as much and as frequently as psychiatry. So what is it about psychiatry that makes it so susceptible?
Well, that's a question I ask myself again and again, and I'm not sure I have the answer to it. But you see, psychiatry, when it turns to its explanatory foundations, finds a middle ground between physical science, where facts of nature are explained, and history, where a person's experience is what determines a bit how they think. And history, as you know, is an argument without end, as has been made clear by a lot of philosophers about it. And I believe it's just that because psychiatry is vulnerable to the presumption that some kinds of problems come from what you've encountered, they can imagine and build up a kind of encounter that explains for them the illness that the patient shows, but is itself incoherent and ultimately disprovable on historical and other grounds. So that's the problem. Psychiatry is a branch of medicine, but it's a branch of medicine that has this other element in its understanding of cause, history. And we should be students of history's errors as well as history's correctness. And once you begin to, it becomes a very interesting philosophical matter. What is history? That I think is what makes it vulnerable. Why particular things turn up, I think that depends on the world itself. I mean, people like Nicholas Christakis have talked about how an idea gets rolling in a community, and important figures in the community promote it, and it's contagious. You know, but it's out of a kind of history, and you see the claim that you've been sexually abused, even though you don't know it, is a historical claim that's going to have to be answered by the historical terms. Anyway, that's my answer to it. Again, I believe that you're going to answer these questions as you take a philosophical and empirical and methodological approach to understanding psychiatry and its practices. And that's what I tried to do in our book, The Perspectives of Psychiatry, and tried also to illuminate in a philosophy paper I wrote with a group in Denmark.
Whenever I talk about this psychiatry getting swept up, your whole idea, though, people will reply to me and say it's something to do with the type of person who is drawn to the field of psychiatry. Is there any truth to that?
I don't think so, but it might be. It might be. I mean, it's a kind of insult, isn't it?
Yes.
We get a field that's full of ignoramuses. No, I can tell you that certain directions of psychiatry will lead the best and the brightest awry. I knew that and learned that and recognized that at Harvard Medical School. Listen, in the 1950s, Harvard Medical School faculty all believed this. And the city of Boston had everybody assured that psychoanalysis was the right thing. You know, you couldn't go out with a girl without discovering, certainly after in Boston in those days, without discovering after a few months there were certain times of the day when you couldn't talk with her because she was with her psychoanalyst. And then you realize, gee, I'm a subject of couch talk like that and bails. But it was very hard to find anybody who said, baloney, I'm working along.
Can I ask you, the last sentence of your book, Try to Remember, you say, my whole intent in writing this book has been to explain the issues and to hasten the day when coherence reigns in my discipline.
Yes.
And that was 2008. And in the book, you quite often reference that the DSM-5 is coming, and you kind of, it sounds like when you're saying it, you're not holding out a lot of hope, but there's a little glimmer of hope that there might be some sort of sense.
I did have a glimmer of hope because, after all, we're talking about, again, leaders in the discipline. It's just that they couldn't bring themselves to move in the direction that I wanted them to do because they thought that it would lead to the incoherence that ridding the discipline of psychoanalytic dominance had accomplished. They just thought it would fall back into denominational fights. I didn't think so, and I don't think so. But
how do you think it's gone since? Like that was 2008, and you were hoping.
Yes, I don't think they've done anything since in the direction I want them to go. You see, they have. This is kind of philosophical, but they have what you might call an epistemological approach to psychiatric diagnosis. That is, can you be reliable? Because they think if you can get people to agree on a diagnosis or how to make the diagnosis, then eventually you'll explain it. So they say reliability in diagnosis first will lead to validity in understanding. That's an epistemological approach. And they don't the real problem with it is they never think they can get beyond it. I take an ontological approach. I want to say, look, how do we make sense right now of this disorder? How do we make it intelligible? And then eventually we'll explain it. So I say, not reliability first, validity second. I say intelligibility first, explanation later. So how do you make things intelligible? And that's what the book, The Perspectives of Psychiatry, is about. How to make coherent, at least, the domain that we're trying to study in seeing the disorders in it. Anyway, that's, I think you like the book. It's the Johns Hopkins Department of Psychiatry still holds it as its fundamental foundational way. And it has the great advantage of having an historical connections and connections to the sciences around it. Look at the mental disorder that the patient is presented this way. Is it a disease of the brain? If not, if that doesn't explain it, would it be an aspect of the person's self, the kind of person he is? Is he mentally retarded, or is he an intensely emotional, neurotic extrovert? If not, is it something he's doing and got himself into difficulty with his sexual behavior, his appetites, his drinking, drugging? Or is it something like anorexia behavior? Or is finally, in the fourth perspective, is it something they've encountered, like grief, traumatic stress disorder, those kinds of things? And if you began to see how these perspectives interact, you can formulate a case that directs therapy and research. Anyway, that was like, the important thing is you can't be against something without offering something in return. And I think what the perspectives does is that instead of both psychoanalysis and DSM's present and the other thing, it offers a way of looking at patients that is traditional and opens the door to science and reflection. Okay.
What you just described it's the part that leapt out of me the most in try to remember the four families. So you're describing the four families. Is it something the person has, something the person is, something the person is doing, or something the person has encountered? I love that. And I think that if you were in charge of DSM-6, which we know is in the works, is that how, would you just toss away all the DSM and write the manual with that framework?
Yeah, well, what I do and what I've explained in the perspectives and also in this philosophy paper is we don't want to give up the reliability that has come from DSM, but we can reorganize it so that instead of just organizing it according to what they look like, put the mood disorders with the mood disorders, things of that sort. We could put it into relationship to what we think could be the derivation of it, the brain disorders with the brain disorders, the personality disorders with the personality, the behavioral, finally the encounters with the encounters. That wouldn't require changing a word from the symptoms that are being used for for identifying, but it would start asking the question, does this really belong here? That's what medicine did with Osler years ago.
You say in your book, and I agree, that psychotherapy can cause harm, and we've seen that. Psychotherapy can cause great harm, but arguably the DSM is causing a lot of harm, and arguably there's something to say to kind of a new group bring out, like, leave the DSM. They've gone. DSM-6 is going to be worse than DSM-5. I don't have the glimmer of hope,
It'd be thicker. It would grow. They keep discovering new ways of organizing symptoms, and some claimant says that this is a new disorder.
caffeine addictive disorder, you know?
I have that. I suffer from that.
See, Stella, that's exactly what you're asking. What is madness? Is it just to be mad? That is what Polonius said. It's just to be mad. And that's what we're doing, because what we're saying is madness is he meets criteria. He's mad. Let's put it this way. It's not a way to make progress. It's not a way to have healthy arguments. I like to talk with my colleagues about it. And I can say this, by following this model, we at Hopkins have done very good advancing research, and good things have come from it. We've had a very collegial department.
With the 4 families, I love your 4 families. With trends would straddle 3 out of 4. Am I correct? Like, I don't.
Yeah, that's right. By the way, I prefer the term perspectives, as
Okay.
they implies that it's just one way of looking at it. You could look at it another way and see more. So within the trans, you usually can. Well, fundamentally, it is a behavior. Okay, the person is striving to live in the opposite sex, but often the individuals have dimensional problems. They're very, very intensely emotional people, and they're also usually immature people. But they have this behavior, and the behavior is also supported in this environment in which they're encountering other people. You see, the life story is supported by them getting from their schools support for it and changing their names and not even telling their parents. So it's at least 3 of the perspectives are in action. And I think, though, that what we've discovered is turning attention away from it does more than anything, because of it as being a behavior supported by attention. That's what I'm very sure, and I've seen just exactly that. Turn attention away from it, get people, the young people, to start thinking in terms of what they're supposed to be doing in school and things of that sort.
Yeah,
It
I
works.
agree with you, but I agree with you. It does work, and I always say distraction is underrated and it's a very powerful tool. I'm a psychotherapist, and you're a psychiatrist, and you're definitely you have a critical eye on psychotherapy, and so do I. But I also have a critical eye on psychiatry, and I feel that since you've left the field, like you've retired some years ago, I feel that the over medication, especially of young people, but of everybody, is an increasingly kind of it's an increasing issue in psychiatry, that all the psych disciplines have lost their way, you know.
I know that's terrible. You know, the medicines have been good, but you still have to guide a person who is high emotionalism. They need guidance, and being shown how they make life worse for themselves in certain ways. The behaviors need to be interrupted, and people who have particular behaviors need to have it understood. And certainly the life encounters, the grief, the homesick, the
Yeah,
post-traumatic stress disorders,
tragedy.
they very much need support and guidance to re-script their life and see how they are affected by the events that happen to them in ways that they might be able to re-script in other ways with the help of psychotherapy. When I wrote Try to Remember, I was very anxious to make the point that the multiple personality, if it casts complete doubt on psychiatry itself, would challenge people who thought that they might have psychotherapeutic help from ever seeking it, and therefore lose out in what they need. The multiple personality problem not only hurt patients, but hurt the field of psychotherapy by by making it clear that some psychotherapists had misled their patients. And that, that's one of the main reasons, a good reason for challenging the trans now, they're going to, once again, cast doubt on whether you could trust psychotherapists. And you need them. You need them. Okay?
Beyond for trans beyond psychotherapy, though, it's we endocrinology is in here, surgery is in here, all the major medical associations are in here. Like, I don't know why they don't realize that it's eroding, destroying the public's trust in the entire medical field that they've championed something so terrible.
I'm amazed by it too. As I said in the last thing, I'm just amazed that whereas in the multiple personality craze and fight, I was really fighting only with psychiatrists. Now in the trans, you're fighting the government and the New England Journal of Medicine and the major. I mean, I can't. Yeah, I'm astonished that this has gone this far, and
So are we.
this is going to be as scandalous and ridiculed as the witch trials or eugenics or lobotomy, eventually.
Wow. We're coming towards the end. I think Mia has one or two questions. So do you want to go, Mia?
Well, really, my last question just ties in with this. So, in multiple personality, you were fighting psychiatry, and the false idea, the false belief that these repressed memories existed and could be brought to light under hypnosis and everything. But in trans, our fight is so much bigger. So what I'm interested in is, obviously you won with the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, and you defeated this false belief. So how, because our fight is so much more complicated and so much bigger, how do you see that we can best formulate how can we best fight it? How can we be most effective in destroying this bad idea?
Yeah. Once again, I think you could follow our lead in the false memory area by developing a program, a false memory program that called together people of goodwill on both sides to study and examine the science and the epidemiology and things of this sort, and eventually find out in what way we can learn from one another. Right now, we're at odds with one another. You're presumed to be an enemy, as we said last time, an enemy if you say, gee, I think this idea that you can change your sex is wrong, and I believe the word gender has gotten us into trouble. Well, I'd like to be able to defend that opinion with people who hold something else while listening to them. I mean, big surprise, I could be wrong, but they have to come out and show. And they don't want to do that because they think, just like the old Freudians, if you don't agree with it right from the start, you must have an agenda yourself. It's what holds psychiatry back.
Can I add to your point there? There's a Freudian kind of instinct that if you don't agree, you must be repressing something. There's a suspicion.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Freudian.
You want to kill your father,
Yeah. I mean, it's really strange. But as Paul Ricoeur said, it's one of the schools of suspicion. He thought there were three that began with suspicion of everything: Marxism, Nietzsche, and Freud. And each school, if you look at it, each one of them carry a suspicion with their theories. Suspicion that the world is a place where evil is being done and there are victims of all sorts. Anyway.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Paul Ricoeur, he wrote a wonderful book on Freud and discussed this.
Yeah, I want to discuss Freud more because I think, like you said, Paul, I think Freudian thought has just gone into, even my own daughter was explaining to me how people can just forget their events. It's in the back of their head, and then you can, you know what I mean? And she was explaining to me, and I was like, no, there isn't any document proof that we can just, what we do is we turn away from awful events and we might not want to remember them. But this idea that there's these perfectly formed memories, almost like a village found under the sea. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It's childish, if nothing else.
Okay. Well, this has been a very nice conversation with
Thank
you.
you so much.
I
Thank
hope
you.
other people do it, but can I show my several books?
Please do. Absolutely. Which is your
Perspectives of-
favorite?
that,
Yeah, we're going
Okay,
to read
that's
that
the
one.
one on my list.
Perspectives of
and
Psychiatry, for those who are listening.
there's Try to Remember.
Oh,
So good.
love it.
You like it?
Absolute brilliant.
I
Loved
think
it.
I also collected a set of essays called "The Mind Has Mountains." That you might.
Oh, I love that quote. Jared Manley Hopkins. The mind has mountains.
You can get them all on Kindle. And finally, Philip Slavny and I, Philip was the lead author here, Psychiatric Polarities. It's the foundational philosophical issues. So can I send you also this philosophical paper? Who should I send that to?
Please do,
Send it
both
to-
of us. Send to
Yeah,
both
send
of us.
Our email. Yeah.
Both of you. Okay.
Thank
Good.
you.
What I think more than anything else is in the history books, the history of psychiatry since in the 20th century is going to be one of the very interesting stories of the emergence of coherence in a medical discipline. Not that it doesn't replicate pretty much what happened in medicine itself in the 19th century, but it does it in the popular press. And it's a very interesting story. Somebody needs to write it up. But it's going to be a study of human thinking and reasoning over matters of illness and disability.
We have a lot to learn.
We should do it.
We
too
should.
old.
There's so much to do. It would make your head spin. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Well, I hope we speak again sometime. Anyway,
I'd love to.
Thank you so much.
thanks
We'll
for having
visit
me.
if we're ever in your direction. We'll come and visit.
I'm
Hello.
not the spokesman for Johns Hopkins or the Johns Hopkins Department of Psychiatry. I'm my own spokesman, and most of these ideas are my ideas. Okay,
I
and
have
I'll
no doubt.
for them and don't claim that I lead Hopkins ideas in any way.
Yeah.
Okay.
You wouldn't want to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. You're brilliant. Bye.
People get mad at me. Okay. All right.